A man thought he was dead and he went to see a psychiatrist for help. The doctor decided that he would convince the man that he wasn't dead by one fact: dead men do not bleed. He gave his patient medical books, even invited him to see an autopsy. The patient finally conceded, "Okay, you're right. Dead men don't bleed." The doctor took out a needle and pricked his patient in the arm, and blood spurted forth. And the patient looked and said, "Oh my goodness, dead men do bleed." For centuries, people have looked at the Bible as a dead book. It's irrelevant and doesn't have anything to do with real life. Well, today we're going to prick the Bible and watch it bleed truth. We've reached a very special part of the book of Daniel. So far, it's stories such as Daniel in the lion's den. From chapter 7, it's very different. We get to the prophetic part. It's a journal that Daniel is keeping and asking, what interest should I have in someone else's dreams and visions? I would reply, just keep listening and you will very definitely see. You may be in for a surprise. Back in 1945, writer George Orwell authored Animal Farm, where the pigs take over the farm and dictate how things should be. Daniel 7 and 8 present two pictures we could title God's Animal Farm. And from chapter 7, it's packed full of future prophecy. It sweeps from Daniel's time to the return of Jesus Christ, touching the great moments of history in between. It lays out God's incredible redemptive plan for history. Now, of course, the unbeliever says, well, it's been written up after the events. But if the book of Daniel is a forgery, the whole credibility of Jesus Christ goes down the drain. Do you know why? Because Jesus quotes from this book. Moreover, he calls Daniel a prophet. In chapter 7, we have an outline of the whole history of the future of the world. In chapters 8 to 12, the individual elements are dealt with. But the panorama comes in chapter 7. The individual features are from chapter 8. The predictions are given through 4 visions full of symbols and pictures to get it across. About 40 years before this, Nebuchadnezzar was given a dream. In chapter 2, that's where you find the interpretation. Daniel interpreted it and gave God's people hope that they were going to have a future. God would see to that. Now there is a reiteration of that promise in a more comprehensive way. It's a wonderful message for the Jews in exile, and Daniel is the agent. While he slept, God turned his dream into a vision and gave him this perspective. And he wrote down the dream and made it public knowledge. It's what we have in our Bible. Okay, what is the theme of the vision? The major point is the coming of the king and the establishment of the eternal kingdom. There is an anti-kingdom and a coming kingdom. There is an explanation of the anti-kingdom. Daniel sees 4 winds of heaven churning up the Great Sea. They lived in the Mediterranean world and it was called the Great Sea. So in Daniel's vision, he's transported back home to Judea. Daniel sees that great Mediterranean Sea all stirred up. And there are 4 wild animals picturing 4 kingdoms that will arise. In verse 15 to 17, an interpreter tells Daniel, "Oh, by the way, Daniel, those 4 beasts are 4 kingdoms that will arise out of the earth." But as Daniel kept looking, he saw a coming kingdom with one called the Ancient of Days and one like a Son of Man coming. Well, let's pick out what Daniel sees as the anti-kingdom. In verse 4, it's pictured as 4 beasts. The first was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a man, and the heart of a man was given to it. And this corresponds to the head of gold, Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian Empire. Remember that? Archaeologists in Babylon have found several examples of winged lions, a depiction of Babylon by the Babylonians. A winged lion, the king of the beasts, and an eagle, the king of the birds. It speaks of power and speed, which characterize Nebuchadnezzar. Notice the wings were torn off. That would indicate a loss of speed, and this happened as Babylon slowly and gradually disappeared. Daniel adds, "And there before me was a second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, 'Get up and eat your fill of flesh.'" Now, this speaks of the Medo-Persian Empire, the chest and arms of silver. A bear is slower than a lion, but it has brute force. Notice also the bear's raised up on one side as if 2 feet are on the ground and 2 feet are up. It's lopsided. That is a depiction of the Medo-Persian coalition. It was never an even union, an equal partnership. The Persians were more powerful than the Medes. And then Daniel says, "After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard, and on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule." Now, a leopard is the most agile of any of the animals. Given 4 wings, it will be incredibly fast. This is a perfect depiction of the next empire, the Kingdom of Greece. When Alexander the Great took over the world, 2 things marked his kingdom: speed of victory and speed of the breakup. He took over the world in 10 years, but just 31 years old when he died in Babylon. On his deathbed, he was asked, "What shall we do with the kingdom?" He said, "Give it to the strong." And the kingdom was divided up between 4 generals, like the 4 heads here, 4 generals. Now, how could Daniel have known that? God showed him. And Daniel says, "After that, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. The main feature is its iron teeth. Historically, we know this to be the iron rule of Rome. Like the legs in the statue, the longest part of the anatomy, Rome ruled the longest. Not 200 years like most of the others, but 1,500 years. And this corresponds to Revelation 13, where John sees a beast coming out of the sea and describes it with the features of a leopard, a bear, and a lion. It has all the features and then some to make it unlike any other creature. And what is most important about the Fourth Empire is that a leader emerges from it, a powerful leader. And we often call that leader the Antichrist. Actually, he goes by 25 names in the Bible, including the beast in Revelation 13. But is called in verse 8 the little horn. He's got a big mouth and big plans to take over the world. The Antichrist is coming. Revelation 12 says that he's going to specifically target at the end of days Jews and Christians. And what follows him is bloodshed. Now we know that for sure that this is true because it's all over the Bible. But there's something else we know. Not only will the Antichrist come, but he's going to have a religious leader with him called the false prophet. Revelation mentions this false prophet. He'll be able to deceive people to follow the Antichrist. So, do you see this? We have the Antichrist followed by the false prophet. And here's the best news. After all of that, Jesus Christ will come and vanquish the Antichrist and the false prophet and set up his kingdom all over the world. And in verse 23, Daniel says, he gave me this explanation. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. Now, that's what we know for sure is going to happen. But what we don't know is exactly who the Antichrist is. And I'm not going to be added to the list of people who have tried to guess and were wrong all throughout history. Did you know Bill Gates has been called the Antichrist? Maybe even by some of you. I don't know. For years, scholars have looked to Western Europe for a revived Roman Empire because they said, well, that's where the Roman Empire was and fragmented. And they've looked for some secular Western leader or perhaps a religious leader like the Pope. I'm going to suggest that we look in a different direction and consider what is today the fastest growing religious system on planet Earth. Islam is the fastest growing religion since September the 11th, 2001. And we need to ask, what plan do 1.8 billion Muslims have in the plan of God for the end times? Any at all? My hope is there will be a mass conversion to Christ. But could there be something else? A federation of Arab states with one person emerging as the leader? Now, are you putting all of this together? According to this text, as well as what Jesus Christ said and Paul and John all together, at the end of days, the Antichrist will come, followed by the false prophet. And Jesus Christ will come and put an end to that kingdom and set up his kingdom forever. Now, if you can't get excited about that, I cannot relate to you. Look at verse 13 of Daniel 7. In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man. Coming with the clouds of heaven, he approached the Ancient of Days. That's descriptive of God 3 times in chapter 7. And was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory and sovereign power. All peoples, nations and men of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Now, this idea that I've been talking about, a federation of Arab Islamic states, poses some issues that people have. One is, what about the revived Roman Empire? That doesn't sound like the Roman Empire. Well, that's because we're thinking about Rome in terms of Western Europe. But the Roman Empire survived a long time, the longest of all of the previous empires mentioned in Daniel, Babylon, Medo-Persia and Greece. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream and Daniel interpreted the same succession of kingdoms. The longest part of that statue Nebuchadnezzar saw were the 2 legs of iron. That's the kingdom of Rome. So you have 2 legs. It's split into 2. And we know from history, AD 395, the Roman Empire split into the west and east. Constantine decided to move the seat of government from Rome to Constantinople, today Istanbul. He continued for another 1,000 years, even after the western part of the Roman Empire dissolved. It continued. Did you know that over 60% of the Roman Empire at the time of the New Testament is today under Muslim control? Those are the fragments of the Roman Empire. And something else that's just interesting to note in verse 25. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his saints and try to change the set times and the laws. The saints will be handed over to him for a time, times and a half a time. Times and law. Do you know what Sharia law is? It's Islamic religious law. Establishing worldwide Islamic law has always been the ambition of Sharia law. Every observant Muslim must change the times in which he or she lives. There's an Islamic calendar that follows the migration of Muhammad from Mecca to Medina, and it's based around that. All observant Muslims observe those times and those laws. Okay, but here is the big question for us. What do we hope for? I realise that this kind of talk can unnerve people and bring anxiety. I don't want that. So keep on looking at the panoramic view of history with me and look at it before it happens. And to balance out everything I've said so far, Muslims are coming to Jesus Christ around the world. You go, wait a minute, you said it's the fastest growing religion in the world. You're right, but mostly because of birth rate and not conversions. But truly, many Muslims are coming to faith in Christ, many of them by dreams and visions. Look, Muslims are not the enemy. Satan with his lies and his false teachings and doctrines, that's the enemy. And like Daniel, we may be troubled by what we've seen, but the prediction includes something that changes everything for us. Do you see it? It's the coming kingdom. Jesus Christ is coming again, and coming with him are 4 things that we can count on. And when I say count on, I mean they're coming, whether we like it or not. And I know they're coming because the things have already been predicted would come, have come. And so the things that the Bible says are going to come, guess what? They're going to come. Fulfill prophecy is our guarantee of future prophecy. So what are those four things? Judgment is coming. Justice is coming. Jesus is coming. And joy is coming. Look at verse 9. There's thrones, a court, a fire, and we have books being opened. It's a judgment scene. God is assuming his rightful seat as divine judge and will make the final reckoning and verdict. Now, Daniel is seeing the future. There's going to be 4 kingdoms that come, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece and Rome, and there's a final dictator, the Antichrist. From Daniel's perspective, they haven't all come yet. From our perspective, all but the final one have come. They made judgments. But now they're on the other end of the judgment process. Question. Is it possible to escape that judgment? Listen, it's not only possible, it's preferable. Here's the deal. Somebody's got to take the rap for sin. Either we're going to take the rap for our own sin, or we're going to let Jesus take it for us on the cross and place our faith in him. That's what Jesus promised. He who hears my words and believes in him who sent me has everlasting life and shall not come into judgment, but has passed from death into life. Did you get that? Everlasting life is as simple as trusting and relying on Jesus Christ. Turning from our own ways to trust in him. We can count on this. Judgment is coming. So we can also rely on this. Justice is coming. Verse 11 says, "Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. The other beasts had been stripped of their authority, but were allowed to live for a period of time." And go down to verse 26. "But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever." His being the horn, the Antichrist, the beast, is completely destroyed. Now, this is only right. This beast, this Antichrist, will lie to the world, try to force people into submission, killing people who will not submit. So it's only justice. When you watch the news and see some miscarriage of justice, there's a criminal and all the evidence says that he's guilty, but on a technicality he goes free. We don't like that, do we? There's something within us that says, at some point in history, there must be justice. Life isn't fair. But one day, justice will come. Because God is too good to let evil go on forever. And one day, evil will be eradicated. And justice is coming because Jesus is coming. Verse 13. "In my vision at night, I looked. And there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence." Now, this verse is the central focus of chapter 7. The central focus is not the parade of these weird-looking animals out of the sea. The central focus is not the little horn with the big mouth and big ideas, the Antichrist who is coming. The central theme is the coming of the kingdom of Jesus Christ to the world. Judgment is coming. Justice is coming. Jesus is coming. One like a son of man. 81 times in the 4 Gospels of the New Testament, the term Son of Man appears. It was the term that Jesus used to describe himself. It's what the Jews believed to be the coming Messiah. The Son of Man is going to come. But when Jesus comes back the second time, it's going to be different than when he came the first time. You see, he came the first time to deal with sin. You know what he's going to do with the second time visit? He's going to take over. He's going to say to all the politicians, move over, let me show you how it's done. He's going to really rule the earth. Daniel sees that. One like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. I think the clouds of heaven refers to the masses of people that he will come back with, all the true believers. So, because Jesus is coming, do you see it? Joy is coming. Look at verse 18. The saints of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. Why is that joyful? Because this is the event that stops all of the wars, all of the violence, all of the terrorism, all of the anxieties. Only this event will bring an end to all of that. So, when Jesus comes, joy will come. People have marched for peace. Last time I checked, it hasn't worked. Only when the Prince of Peace comes back will that work. That's why there will be joy. That little book in the New Testament, the book of Jude 24, says that God will present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy. And did you notice Daniel 7:18? Who are the saints of the Most High who possess the kingdom forever? Who would the saints be? The word is holy ones. You know who it is? All angels are called by that term in Daniel 4. So the kingdom is going to be occupied by angels. But who else are saints? God-fearing redeemed Jews of all ages are there. Psalm 116 and the first verse. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. The redeemed of the Old Testament are going to be there. The apostles are going to be there. Matthew 9:28 tells us that they are going to rule with Christ over the 12 tribes of Israel. And the saints of the gospel period will be there. The tribulation saints are going to be there in the kingdom. Read the book of Revelation. So, to get this, adding it up, the Old Testament Jewish saints, the saints and believers in the period of the Gospels, the saints redeemed out of the tribulation are all going to receive the kingdom, and we, as present-day believers, will be there too. And how long does it last? Notice the key word in verse 14, everlasting. People say, what about the 1,000-year reign of Christ? That's just phase 1. The rest goes on forever. It is an everlasting dominion. His kingdom shall not be destroyed. In Revelation 5, the church sings, you have made us kings and priests to our God, and we will reign on the earth. It couldn't be more clear. Part of eternity will be you and I having a position of management and administration in his kingdom. How cool is that? Jesus is reigning, and he says to us, come and help me. Help you what? I'll give you a job. I'll let you help administer this thing. So let's live now with our eyes on eternal life. Let me close with this. In ancient mythology, there's the story about Penelope and Ulysses. Ulysses had embarked with other great heroes to the siege of Troy to conquer that city-state. The voyage took him away for 20 years. His wife, Penelope, was at home without word about him. She was a beautiful woman. During his absence, she had more than 100 nobles propose marriage, but hers was a beauty not only of form, but of character. There was always a glimmer of hope, and she stayed faithful. She told everyone, "I will give an answer to the proposals when I finish weaving." She would work all day weaving and at night undoing what she had spent all day doing. She did that for 20 years. One day a beggar entered the palace and found all these men proposing. In a trial of strength, he decided to prove himself the worthiest of them all. Penelope had kept one of Ulysses' bows that only he could string. She offered it to the beggar, saying, "Use this to defend yourself." He pressed the bow and strung it, and she knew it was Ulysses, disguised to see if she had been faithful. They were united after they took revenge on all her suitors. If Penelope can wait for Ulysses without word, can't we wait for Christ? We have his word. We have the promise that he'll be back. Be as faithful to him whom we have not seen, as was she to her husband. Said John, if you have this hope in you, it purifies you.